I want to start out just by welcoming everybody. It's so good to have you in here, Atlas. We want to just shout out mau5trap, Dean Wilson and Jessica Wilson at 720, and Eduardo and Emily and Mario at mau5trap for giving this opportunity, and also the guys at Rising Digital for being partners. I just want to thank everyone as well for joining the Emanate Electronic Collective. This is a channel, it's probably new to a lot of people, but it's a part of our Emanate project. And just to give you a little idea about that, we're trying to solve the solution about getting paid instantly with your music. So that's what we're building out. It's still in a pretty early development stage, but I would urge you all please to have a look and sign up. It's got a bit of work to do, but yeah, we'd love to have you testing it and telling us what you want as artists so we can help you grow and give you tools that you need to make life easier, because we know how hard it can be as an artist these days, and we just want to support you and do everything we can, because everyone's got the right to create music, and we just want to help you guys find an easier path with that. So that's really all I have to say, and I know Jeff has started going through some of the questions that you guys had, but we might just wait until after, if everyone's cool with that, and I guess hand it over to Jeff again to sort of take you through the top 10. I think you'll agree that there were so many entries, and I want everyone to know that I submitted a short list to the guys, but Jeff decided to go through every single one, which was a lot. So props to him, and I'll let him sort of take over.
It was really crazy. I mean, I know firsthand how really difficult it is to write a good song, and not just come up with the idea, but you have a production that feels finished, and it's really hard. So I was kind of blown away that there was that much new creativity that came out of elements that it took me months, if not years, to finally turn that one melody and the vocal into a finished product. And the fact that those same elements were turned into a ton of tracks that were in many cases past what I knew how to do with production tricks or melodies that I never would have thought of. And then I started looking up some of these people. So I ended up following a bunch of new artists just from the whole process of this all. And blew my mind that some of you guys are half my age, and I guess that's the cool thing about growing up now is you have all these production tools at your fingertips, and I don't think fidelity and production quality is really a question. It's been super demystified, which is when I was 12, 11, 13, 14, 15, 16, right until now, most of my writing was done on instruments. I wanted to be Neil Young or Stevie Ray Vaughan. I was building guitars and taking apart strats and all that stuff, and then I had to learn the music side first and get into all the production. But I think it's just blew my mind that people half my age were better at tools that I didn't even exist when I was that age. So that's just sort of a blanket statement on everything that kind of came in musically. So I was really humbled and overwhelmed by kinds of creativity, genres that I didn't even think people that listened to my music were familiar with. All these things. It was really awesome. I heard so many different instruments. Should I just? I could almost say something good about every single track. We'd be here, all day. But I can start with doing the top 10, Emanate folks. What's the best way of doing it? Because I know initially we had it's going to be 3 spots, and I thought, how do you do that? And then we started expanding it. And if you gave me 20 spots, I'd find 20 tracks. If it was 50 tracks, it'd be a top 50. So we did push, because there's so much good creativity that I know firsthand that it really sucks to work really hard on something, and you put hours into it, and you think this is a great idea, and a part of your soul's in there, and at least if not your soul, a lot of your free time. So it sucks when that stuff kind of goes unheard. So hopefully expanding it to 10 gets more projects out there and more people listening to interesting music. It really blew my mind. So should I just start with 10 and move up, or what do you think the best way to do this is?
I think if you started at 10 and moved your way down to 1, and just say as much as you feel necessary on each one, because yeah, obviously everyone appreciates your kind words and love that validation. And yeah, as you said, you know, it's not just about the top 10. There was so many entries. So yeah, if anyone gets, you know, disheartened or didn't get mentioned, just know that you know, it was beyond the scope of what we could allow, and that should just encourage you, and there'll be plenty more opportunities.
For sure. Yeah, actually, I guess I could say something too on remixes. Is like, remixes were kind of, you know, the way that I figured out, like, you know, the ATTLAS sound. Like, I think some if not most of my most kind of crucial tracks for getting this whole thing kicked off for me were remixes. I mean, I go back to that like Oral Synapse one, that the Rihanna ones. Like, my personal favorite is that Fantagram one. So it's like the remix is sort of, you know, a whole new perspective on like creating, and I've found it really, really useful when I was doing remixes. Well, actually, I have like 4 that I just submitted and mastered too. So see like how other people write, you think, oh, you know what, I thought the way that a synth line was in the mix or something, or just the way they buried that melody, or like, you know, where the harmonies came from, so unique. And I mean, I learned through it's like when you, I think when you sort of dismantle the project, it does demystify a lot of the creativity, and I think that's a really important thing in music, especially these days, because I think people really deify acts. They'll look up to someone, and they're just people. They learned a few tools that help them, you know, tell their story or articulate an emotion. And I think, yeah, the demystification process of creativity is really, really important. I mean, everyone who made music is mortal, which is, you know, in a lot of ways humbling, in a lot of ways elevating. So I guess I'll start with 10. This is one that I first saw on Twitter, and then I was really pumped to hear the first whole version of it. And that's, if I'm saying this right, the Saigo no Ronin remix.
I think so, yeah. Saigo no Ronin.
And I mean, that's a mix that, like, it's a really cool one because, well, I guess as I go through the list, I tried to make sure that there was, like, you know, there were genres represented. There were, you know, textures and atmospheres and a real spectrum of energy represented. So Saigo no Ronin was a cool way of flipping the vocal, and it's like a little more ambient and sound designy, but really, really great production fidelity. So then I'll go.
By the way, I will mention this, everyone that's listening, I'm going to put all these up on Emanate in a list. Just with the time change, I didn't have a chance. They were all supposed to be ready to go, but hang around and I'll post it. So if everyone wants to hear what Jeff's talking about and explaining in this top 10 and the winners, they'll all be up hopefully within a few hours that this finishes.
Yeah, I mean, I got the folder. I guess, yeah, you guys will post them, eh? So
yeah.
Okay, great. The 9 spot went to an artist. He's had a bunch of releases before, but I think it was just too cool of an idea not to pass up. And the thing that really did it for me was like when it kicks in and it's like this really great live organ. That Chay remix, Chay.
Chay.
I mean, a lot of these are sort of hard to. I'll be describing things that are, you know, without
listening,
you know, context for you guys. If I'm talking about, like, you know, an organ line or something. So maybe it does more of a service if I, you know, announce them and sort of do a bit of energy, you know, towards a track without going to details that are just going to kind of, you know, fly over everyone's head until it. Okay, so that's, yeah, maybe that's a better way of kind of doing it, eh? All right, well, we'll go. 8 was the Loop Collective remix. Loop Collective remix. I don't know if I'm thinking twice. Like, it's all recorded. I'll just type it too. Loop Collective. But that one really stood out because I was like, yeah, I guess you guys aren't going to hear them, but you will. But anyways, that has a lot of really, really beautiful guitar and not necessarily like a whole like indie rock vibe, but I don't know. It really stood out and it was extremely musical, and I'm really pumped for you guys to hear it. 7 was, and for sure, jump in if I'm, you know, mispronouncing these. Hyukari. So here, I'll take that one. Hyukari remix.
I think so. Yeah.
It's gonna be really exciting to actually hear all these together because, and once again, like, I was sort of blown away by how much unique creativity was brought to each of these. Actually, as we sort of go up them, there's tons. For 6, if I'm saying this right as well, is the Kaiyan. You know, I don't want you guys to think it's the spice. So I'll type it out. Kaiyan remix. That was great because I think, you know, when you look at it, you think pardon me, not look, you listen, you think, is this a track that, you could play out? Or some of them are just, blows me away with the sound design, or it's something you want to have on when, you're chilling on the balcony in the backyard with your friends. But the Kaiyan remix was for sure one that is like, play outable. And I was really pumped that, something like that evolved out of this project, that you could, throw it in a set, in the afternoon or at like, 3 a.m. And either way, it was going to be really great track to play out. And as we're going through this list, you see how it was super hard to even get it down to 10, eh?
I know.
Right, number 5, and I'm typing these out too, eh? FLYON remix, FLYON. Say that everyone's in here just chilling and chatting away. So 5 is the FLYON remix. Oh, now we're starting to really get up too. Okay. I guess, is it the top 4 spots? Yeah, so how are we doing like the official release like of all these? Because I want to make sure that there's sort of like a master list, or at least like as high quality as possible, like a wave and apes get out for all these.
Yep, they will. I'll put them on the Emanate. So what we do when we have the remix comp, we host the winners on a remix ATTLAS page that'll be on Emanate. So all the audio will be up there. They'll be grouped from 10 to 5, and then the winners, the top winners, will be separated, but still on that same page. So a bit like playlisting, right? So that's how we'll present it, and then we'll just chuck it in the announcements channel of this Discord, and everyone can check them out.
Awesome. Yeah, it's that's the thing too that was so hard is like, and actually I encourage for everybody, and when I'm doing remixes too, you never really know if it's going to get taken, but the process is so useful. Creating with, especially like, high level vocals are so hard to get. I mean, you can just for hours and hours and hours, and it's it can be daunting. So when you get a good vocal, it really spurs on the creativity. I mean, if you have a remix that didn't make it onto the top 10 list or something, you take away that vocal or something, or you chop it up or whatever. Like, there's so much good music that can exist that came out of this remix contest and will exist and persist in its own creative sphere, independent of having Half Light with ATTLAS and Elisa. Like, take the few elements of mine that were part of the track, take them out and put something new in. And I think that's how I've got a bunch of tracks in the past, eh?
It's a great idea.
Here in the audio. Okay. Oh, you guys can still hear me though, eh? Well, there's Mr. Loop Collective. Okay, so then we'll go into the top 4 now. So so wrapping up just to kind of repeat, make sure everyone gets a nice shout out. So 10 was Saigo no Ronin, and for sure, I could be pronouncing these wrongs. 9 is Chay. 8, Loop Collective remix. 7, Hyukari remix. 6 is Kaiyan. 5 is FLYON. Okay, so now we're going to the top 4. So we're 2 that were, I guess, tied for 3, so that we could kind of have like top 3 was expanded, and then 3 expanded turned into the top 10. So here's, I guess we'll start with the joint at 3 would be Half-Light Julian Gray. And Julian Gray worked super hard on this one too. It's like he just put out on Anjuna as well, and he has his mau5trap stuff, but like there was so much creativity and energy and production discipline in the project. It's just awesome to have the caliber of productions that came in on this. And so there's Julian at 3, and then tied with another 3 is Laminar remix. And the Laminar remix was so sick too. That was I guess I'll hype these up. Like, of course, the Julian Gray one was a beautiful progressive record. Laminar was this like really cool high energy kind of liquid drum and bass thing, and it just moves like with so many colors. It's really and Laminar's not here. Oh, I'm sure he will be, eh? Like, it was just a beautiful record. It was so good, eh? 2, and this was one that was like just stood out, and then I realized like it's almost the record that I should have written, but I wasn't smart enough to, and at the time I didn't have a computer that could handle like more than 2 VSTs. So number 2 is the Lamorn remix, Lamorn, and that's like a really killer remix. I went back and listened to everything that Lamorn had online on SoundCloud, just because I was so blown away by the production. So that's Lamorn. Shoot, I should be typing these out. I said I was going to type them all out. Well, I'll do it again. 3.
The community's doing that for you.
Oh, okay, yeah. 3. And now we're getting to 1, and I guess without further ado, and this is, oh man, I'm gonna say it right.
Drum roll. This is a drum roll.
Yeah, drum roll. Is the Kade Spear and NeoPheonix remix, and when you'll hear it, you'll know for sure. It's just it's a massive and beautiful production, and it did something so wonderful and beautiful to the track. It's I mean, I for sure am, I feel a lot of ways like, miles behind these guys and what they can do production wise. I mean, I always focused on, the composition side of my stuff, and these productions are just nuts, eh?
Yeah.
Sphere.
It's completely
NeoPheonix, right? I'm
it's
saying it right?
completely insane. I think, yeah, NeoPheonix and Kade Sphere. Yeah, I believe that's correct.
Oh man, yeah,
Big
and that was
congratulations.
it just, to overuse a term, man, it just jumped off the page, eh? Like, oh, like so like I just wanted the same thing. I went back and tried to find everything I could from everyone in the top 10 just to re-listen and re-listen, because there's so much good creativity. And like, this project, not only did it bring a cool perspective onto the track, but man, I found so many new artists to follow and truthfully look up to after this. So just that's a top 10, and it's an unreal collection of music, a larger unreal collection of music. So
Yeah,
it's
awesome. I'm really glad that it was successful for you guys, and the top four, I believe, we just need to get confirmation. We'll be getting released on mau5trap in a remix pack for you, which is a bonus. And of course, there's the $400 USD for the winner. I think it was 200 and 100 for second and third. So that's awesome. And also mau5trap merch packs. And the winners also receive a brand mentoring session with Emanate guys, so we can help you get a bit more clarity if you need it around your branding and your online identity. So yeah, we were super happy to work with you on this, Jeff. It looks like the chat's gone a bit crazy, but do you want to rewind a bit? I've got the questions here that you started with. Did you want to finish going off through those, and then we'll close it out?
For sure, yeah. Like, I don't know, I'm just pumped for everyone to hear these too. I mean, like, definitely, so cool, because like, it's just it's a track that I worked on. It did take years from the first like little hook, that bum ba dum bum ba da ba bum, to go, and and then meeting Elisa and then having the whole project come together. I for sure could not pull off like the Kade Sphere NeoPheonix track at all. It's just I'm so pumped for everyone to hear it. Unless maybe everyone on Discord kind of knows them, but this is my first time chatting on Discord and all that, eh? So I guess I'm gonna go back to the top of the list, if that makes sense, to like the top of the chat right here, eh?
Uh-huh.
And just start going through those questions. Does that make sense, or should we do them from like the bottom of the chat?
I think we should do them from the top,
sense?
because some of these guys have had their questions waiting for days with anticipation.
Perfect. Okay. So I'll just go back to the second one. There is hey man, 2 fast questions I always had in mind to know from: did you study musical composition, and how do you start a track? Okay, so did I study musical composition? Yeah, I definitely did. I went to growing up, I played instruments, a lot of piano lessons, a lot of jazz. I had a trumpet teacher. Then when I was halfway through high school, I switched from I was doing like the normal conservatory classical piano. You learn the theory, you do your piano recitals, and then I switched to more of a jazz-based teacher, because I wanted to learn composition, and specifically at that point in my life, improvisation. I was like, that's when I was really into Bill Evans, Lee Morgan, Red Garland, Miles Davis, just all the jazzes, and even like the voicings they were coming up with mid solo. I thought, man, I'd have to study for days to even pull off just even conceiving those mid tracks. So I was really drawn towards jazz and composition, and so I was one of those things, like I hung out with a bunch of music kids too, like always growing up, and we said, it's one thing to learn how to play Beethoven, but how do you learn to write Beethoven? And I think that was always the big draw. And how do I start a track? Say 9 times out of 10, like I'm pretty, I don't know, I love working in pencil, so to speak, right? Like just big sketches, and then when it's time for a release, or I'm tired of sketching, you go back through your list, and then you start you start doing things in ink a bit better. So I do a lot of sketches, which is just a big blank session. I'll just run it for a long time, and I'll just bring up a cool synth patch, or most of the time it's like piano, and I'll just kind of hammer out chord progressions at different tempos. I'll hammer out melodies at different tempos, or melodies over chord progressions that I like. And I guess for me, it's like I'm not like Matt Lang or Mr. Bill. I'm not like Mr. Sound Design. I very much live in the world of like melody, harmony, arrangement, or at least that's what motivates me. So yeah, that's a start track. It's unless it's something that I have a very specific goal to, like I want to flip a sample, or like that I Need You More track was going back to an old Richard Twice track, and I kept chopping it up and dropping different parts in sampler. Yeah. So we're not sure. Lavender God is such a great album. What song on the album was the most difficult, time-consuming to finish, and which was the easiest / quickest? Okay, let me think. So I think the one that was the most time-consuming was actually didn't make it on the album. There was a track called Lavender God that never made it on the album, but that was the whole thing that sort of kicked off the concept. It all kind of came to me when I was meditating, and my computer at the time couldn't handle it. It was this big thing that sort of went from similar to the track Home, where it had like big parts, and then you'd sort of walk out of that room musically and it'd be something more quiet, and then playing with time signatures a bit, which I like to do. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it's an experiment, but at least I was the only one to write those ones. So but I think the one that was like difficult but the most satisfying would be more than that to close the album, because it opened up with that big melody or motif, which initially actually I was going to have through the whole album, like open up with just the synth version of it and then close with like the big version. But that was really time consuming because it was like all those drum samples, and you're playing in stuff from live kits, and then you're programming it in from whatever cool live hits you have, and then recording stuff too to make it almost feel like, I don't know if you guys know the record Love Supreme. I think the fourth movement in that, it's a John Coltrane record, Psalm. Anyways, we saw it when I was younger. I saw Wynton Marsalis and his live orchestra play that, and they had this version at the end that was just, I don't know, they had these like really massive rubato elements that were just these massive like percussion, just sounded like it was raining all around you. And then of course the next bits and pieces in that track, like you have footsteps going through these different kind of rooms of music. And then that was basically repurposing a ton of old samples from demos of mine that just never went anywhere. You pop them up, you repitch them, and Super John too. I mean, a lot of acts that did it, but I guess the ones that I really referenced would be Van Dyke Parks, who his own solo albums. The one that I referred to a lot when I was writing this was Long Cycle, and a lot of Bibio records where he'll tuck a few ideas all in one track, or like the outro 2 minutes will be a completely new track, and I just thought that was kind of nice, right? Like I could have split it off into 3 shorter tracks or extend those 1 or 2 minute bits out into something, but I thought there was like a real sense of like autonomy and authorship, because it's like it's not really play outable, it's all these different moods, and I think it really showed that I was in charge of the I was driving the bus, right? Like if the bus is going to crash, man, I want to be the one driving it. I want to be sitting there and waiting for someone to crash it. So, which was the easiest, quickest? To be honest, probably. Easiest, quickest. The actual track that ended up being called Lavender God was just, I renamed an old track called A Certain Time of Day, or A Time of Day, and I renamed it to be Lavender God. So as far as the track existing, that one was as much as quick as just retyping something. That was that one. Okay, let's go. Well, that's 2 questions. All right. Love Your Bloom EP. Oh yeah, was a really special one. Okay, so this is the 3rd question, just if you're following along. I'm gonna read the question, then I'll do an answer. Question: a few of us producers always discuss that cool air feel that your tracks have. Actually, I didn't know that. That's really nice. Assuming that has to do with reverb, I'd like to know what reverb you use on your tracks, especially, and how you apply it in the mix. Okay, so it's a question about reverb. So reverb I use is, I have the Valhalla one, but the one I use the most is actually the Ableton stock one. But then I have all kind of like my own settings on your decay time, your wet dry. Another thing that I really find is useful, and maybe this is kind of how everyone uses reverb, but it just comes from like an old studio thing, right? Set everything up as buses. I think in Ableton they're called sends, but I think EQing your reverb and actually understanding space that it exists, and you want your instruments to belong to a space. Except that I started doing something that I heard John Hopkins and actually the Chainsmokers do too. It's like when you have a really, really long reverb, like an extra one, and that one's not sidechained or anything, it almost floats above the track. And I thought that was kind of a funny thing to hear, and like both those guys doing it. But also like, I don't know, I don't know if it's my setup. Like I'm just like in my bedroom, I've never had like a treated room. I only got monitors like 2 years ago, just producing on a budget. But I guess if you're talking about like the specific reverb, it's sort of the way I send a lot of stuff there, and then just making sure, it's real simple, but it's good. It's EQing stuff. And two, next question here, how important do you think it is for new artists to seek and attach themselves to a label? I think it's a lot different now than it used to be, and I think what labels are evolving beyond. Before, it was a lot of like the infrastructure that you couldn't be responsible for. Infrastructure, I say, of like releasing music, of printing things, of distribution. But I think now labels are maybe kind of evolving into I wouldn't really call them like an artistic collective, but they're as much about like the parties they curate, sort of the aesthetic atmosphere and texture of records they sign. I mean, there's a reason why, like erase tapes, I think of erase tapes, I think of like, pianos and strings and ambience and emotional depth. You have Dirty Bird, and you think of, the parties and the artists, and, their output as much as anything else. So I think the label is, they matter a ton. And actually, one thing that I will say is an underrated aspect of a label, but maybe it's being almost not replaced or supplanted, but you can find it elsewhere. But me, I think one of the best things was actually just being able to communicate with other musicians who were in similar sort of stages of the career. I think that's one of the hardest things, and I still kind of wish it existed in more of a. It's hard to find like mentorship because you can only listen to one song at a time, and I find a lot of musicians they're competitive in a good way, and it forces us to like learn new things and try things out and really push ourselves. But I'm competitive in a lot of stuff, but I just sort of write my own music in my own way, and it was really nice to make friends who also like care about music and care about the integrity of their craft. So that's that one. All right, next question. Quick question: do you master your own work, and what DAW do you use when writing music? That's the funny thing. I think of like my official releases. There've been ones that have been my masters. There've been ones that have just been a print, like the whole like the session going into a limiter. There have been ones where we have full stem masters, ones where we have a stereo master, and the funny thing is too, sometimes you'll do a couple passes and yours will sound the worst, which happens a lot, or yours will sound the best, but sort of a real mix. And I'm actually surprised when I sort of play the game, like guess which one is which, how different they are. And I don't know if you guys are the same, but like since I'm starting each track from scratch, sometimes you're kind of mixing as you go, and sometimes a mix is going to sound boomier or deeper. Like that mix for concussion, because the whole thing is about like the warm gnarly kind of like low rumble versus that track. I go back and listen to some tracks and like, man, it's really bright. There's not a lot of low end happening, like that track Lighthouse, but it's kind of really bright and airy and kind of chills and bounces along. And there's a reason why different tracks are mastered differently. But ultimately, if when I can afford the budget, it's always nice to have an outside perspective on it, because you just get so darn used to your own stuff. Balance your own curiosity and urge to experiment with new sounds with the expectations that fans and label might have from you. Well, good question, because I mean, I don't know, right? Like, you kind of go back. There's only a couple times where I've written the same track twice, and I think from a creative perspective, it's a lot more fun for me to. I love writing music. Hopefully, like everyone here who's producing loves writing music as well, because it's really, really special thing. And I sort of say it just before too to like a lot of people, if they kind of ask what it's like, let's say like the best food you ever had was your grandma's food or something, and she's like the best cook. If you would say, Grandma, you should start a restaurant, because I think running a restaurant is a lot different than loving cooking. And I think one can sort of take you out of the passion from the other. Like another thing too is like I love like hanging out with my girlfriend, Melissa. And we kind of act silly, and like you dance and you do dumb stuff, but I have a blast. It's like I feel really comfortable and at ease. But if someone filmed me dancing and put it online, I'd probably never dance again. I'd hate dance, and I'd feel so ashamed with all the stuff that's attached to it. And I was just trying to do something for fun. So, So the question was, how do I balance my curiosity to experiment, the expectations that fans and label might have from you? I don't actually know if I've found like the right balance. It goes back and forth a lot. There's a lot of records that I'm sitting on because they sounded too close to other things, and I just didn't put them out. Or sometimes you think, oh, this is a great record, and this is the one that my friends like listening to, or like my sister, my girlfriend, and brother. Those are the ones they like listening to. But I think there's no tricks, man. It's just like there's a hi-hat loop that I just drag in from a sample pack, a kick, and I just happened to find like a really cool melody. Like there wasn't any production tricks or whatever. And but yeah, sometimes you got to balance it back and forth. You can for sure overthink your work. I think it happens more often than underthinking your work, to be honest. Raven Boast, pardon me, question: how do you approach the process of finding vocalists? Sometimes it happens naturally. Like I'm working on a track right now, and the vocalist came to me. Well, sort of like they came to me. I sort of discovered this vocalist because I was talking to John. John goes by the name Ash. He's released on mau5trap and Immersive, and coming up on Dom Kane's label. And so I heard a track of his. I saw, that vocalist is amazing. He said, Jeff, that vocalist actually an engineer and a composer who worked at the studio, or pardon me, works at the studio that I used to work at in Toronto. So we connected through there, and we found that. Sometimes it's you do these, like a songwriting session, and you'll really click with somebody, and then maybe the track doesn't come out that day, but 2 weeks down the line, or 2 months, or 2 years down the line, you think, what, I finally have the perfect vocal for you. And it sort of evolves sort of naturally through that. And then sometimes you'll get pitches, and it'll just, kind of fit naturally and perfectly. And then sometimes, labels will have sort of a pool of acapellas or tracks that they own the publishing to, and get a chance to go through there. And it happens the other way around too, right? Like you'll sort of throw your productions into tracks and pools, because I used to be a studio writer, and used to live in Los Angeles, being an assistant for a composer there. So you build up your skills, and you don't want to waste these tracks, so they're all kind of sitting around. And I think the conversation evolves, and sometimes it's someone who knows you, and sometimes it's formal introduction, and sometimes it just happens you're hanging out and someone's a good singer. Next question from Carr: who are some of your biggest influences in my music? That's a good point. I mean, obvious ones were, when I was getting into the dance side of electronic, the pretty easy big three that I think makes sense for a lot of reasons were Matt Lang, Matt Zoe, and deadmau5. But then what music I was listening to a lot at the time when I was producing was a lot of ambient and piano. I was really hoping to be a film composer. So that was when I was listening to a lot of things like, it says your computer will sleep soon unless plugged in. I'm just going to grab a power cable or adapter or something.
Cool. So I'll just jump in and start talking. A lot of the guys are asking where the winners and the top 10 are going to be uploaded. I'm going to update everyone. The site's called Emanate.live. You'll be able to listen without signing in for about 5 minutes. So if anyone wants to jump over at the moment, cool, and sign up now, would encourage you to do so. We'll have a playlist there. And
I'm back.
Yeah, cool, man.
Sorry.
I'm just filling them in on where the mixes will be hosted.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. So they'll be up on emanate.live. I will do a shout to everyone once they're up, and you'll be able to check them out.
Okay, I'll go back to biggest influences in music. Oh, and that's the thing too. Like, go back to the first EP. There was I'm trying to think what balance of tracks was, but it's kind of like the way I always do my stuff. There's a heavy track, but then there's like the chill out stuff that was called Taylor. There was track like Beginnings. There was Luna on there. So I mean, the music was always honestly a balance of like cool club stuff that I thought was fun to listen to and a challenge to produce, alongside very melodic based stuff. But that's when it gets into all this stuff like piano players like Chili Gonzalez, and of course Boards of Canada. Bibio is a big one, but then at the time, like, the music I listened to it's, a lot of orchestra stuff, a lot of old religious music, like the old choir stuff, right, when they didn't really have a lot of instruments, and the music was sort of communicated through like just voice. And then of course that evolves into like the really big polyphonic, big suspended chords like Eric Whitacre, And then yeah, a lot of Van Morrison, Tom Waits, Leonard Cohen. Like I wanted to be Stevie Ray Vaughan for so long, right? Like I hunted down original issue Texas Special pickups just so I could build like a really heavy Strat. And of course, since I'm a, I love Strats, like Mark Knopfler's. I think I'm gonna say pardon me, which musician has such a an influence on the way I approach melody. It's probably gonna be Mark Knopfler. But the list could kind of go on and on. And I mean, these days, probably like the DJ I listen to the most for if I'm gonna listen to like a DJ set would be probably Vril. Just like really atmospheric, kind of looping techno, what you can kind of really get lost in. But it evolves. Like, I mean, if you look at the remix contest, I discovered like new music, and I've been digging through SoundCloud just from this remix contest too. So I think it always expands. It's like concentric circles, right? I mean, it helps to kind of go back home, and then you start the outward journey again. Let's see. Question from I Am Raven Knight. Does being signed to a label known for a sound vibe have any impact consciously or subconsciously on the music you write? I would say yeah, it for sure does. I could expand on it. I mean, there's like, I mean, yeah, of course it does, right? I mean, like sometimes it's like at the start it was a combination of like hero worship, so you want to be like good enough, and then you think, okay, but wait a second, you want to have your own voice too, right? I mean, it's a lot, in a sense. I wouldn't say it's easier, but if I say, oh, write me an essay and it's due tomorrow, that's all I tell you, well then that's pretty challenging. But if I say, hey, give me 1,500 words on the history of ballpoint pens, well, it's a lot more focused, it's a lot more narrow, and you can, I think, attack the problem with a lot more specificity and discipline. So I know that's a bit more metaphorical, but I'll just say yeah, it does. Leaf the Viking, when are you coming to Portland? I don't know. I don't know when we're playing anything at this rate. I think because I'm here in Canada too, I think Crossing Borders is going to have its own new set of, we'll just call them hurdles. But yeah, I think the one only time I played Portland, I was playing there, opening up for Lane 8. And a really funny story, for the longest time through university, I had this big journal that was, I guess, just like an idea journal. Sometimes I'd write down, like, oh, I had a lucid dream and this thing came to it. Sometimes I'd print off like stills from cool films, because at the time I was of course wanted to be filmmaker or composer. Sometimes I'd just copy phrases from favorite books, and sometimes I'd be sitting on the train just sort of writing my thoughts down. I was so exhausted that trip when we were last in Portland that I left that journal there, and I've never seen it since. So I had some really cool stories and ideas, and that's when I was into really experimental film, cutting up 16 mil film and reprinting it in the darkroom and stuff. Let's see here. Question from Stalagmite. How long were you making music before you first began releasing, and how do you get involved with labels? Well, I always played in bands, guitar, and because when you're young, it's like I wanted to be in all those Sum 41, Boxcar Racer, was all the ones like Taking Back Sunday, Thursday, because they were really good at guitar and all that kind of stuff. So I was just hanging out at the skate park when I was in grade school, just wanting to be in bands, and of course I was doing piano the whole time as well. So I mean, I was making music and jotting down ideas, I think since grade school. But I think because this is electronic music, I can be more specific with the production questions, and when it talks about specifically electronic music. So I think when I was after university, I worked at a studio, and I was really geared towards composition. Then from there, I moved to LA to start interning and then assisting for a composer there, and still thought my path was going to be through sort of I guess the machine of professional composition. And not to say it's like a music sweatshop, but it's pretty close, like those big ones remote control and stuff. That's where I actually for that job I had to get really good at it, or learn a lot about a VST called Zebra. It's now actually the only one I use because it was so popular in that studio, alongside all their contact libraries and Omnisphere as well. But Zebra was the one that at the time I could afford, and it's because of that path, I think specifically, it led me to, I guess, composing in a certain style. And I only sent my music to mau5trap. They're the only electronic music label that that heard it. And it was sort of at that point, I was so set on my path of composition that, and that was, when the whole like, dead mouse phenomenon was really crescendoing. And I thought, well, that should be my benchmark for quality. If the quality's not at their level, then I'll keep trying. But I'm going to pursue music. And I sort of came to them with what I thought were pretty close to solid demos. And I just sort of began a conversation. And I think I was just sort of polite, and but I didn't have a SoundCloud or a name or anything. Actually, the Atlas name happened after we had like a bunch of tracks finished and mastered. I think I was always music first, and then everything else, second, third, fourth, fifth. Yeah, and my experience these days too, just talking to people that are like great musicians, producers who maybe don't have anything on SoundCloud. It's I don't think quality goes overlooked for that long, for the most part. I mean, everyone that musicians are inherently competitive for sure, but I think one step beyond that is we're all big fans of music, and I don't think good music can be kept quiet for too long. So there are still like hidden gems that you wish were bigger, but I think quality doesn't get overlooked for too long. From Oopsie NTD, what are the best tips you can give to someone that has recently started producing? I'd say like the number one tip would be, just from my own perspective, because there's a lot of great 8-tone music and heavy sound design, production heavy music, but I would say learn an instrument. Not because you're gonna have to play do a piano recital or something, but I think it lets the ideas get from your head to the page, or the page so to speak, a lot quicker. Like if I think, oh, I got this melody in my head, bum, ba-dum, ba-dum, I can sit down and hammer it out. Or if you're a guitar player, you could record it in. I know there's kind of MIDI guitars, but I think just understanding the way melody harmony works, especially when you're trying to find a voicing for a chord. Like, why does a song in E major feel different than a song in B major? Okay, you got to figure how you're going to space across the voicings of those chords. Are you going to have most of your triads below middle C or above middle C? And I think a lot of those things will of course be affected in the mix, but yeah, I'd say the number one tip would be learn an instrument. And I think number two tip would be practice that instrument. Okay, next question is from Mersen. Your Oral Silence remix is what sold me on your style as an up-and-comer. Glad you're not stopping. Aside from creative aspects, what do you think are the most important factors in your growth prior to, as well as joining after mau5trap? I sort of touched on this a bit before. In that track, we actually did like 11 versions of it. It was for times when I sort of got to a point where I felt okay with my production skills. I didn't really say I didn't have a ton of confidence in my ideas. I think that bit of self-analysis comes after a lot of work, right? I mean, to know if your track is good or not. I mean, sometimes you can work on a track and come back to it a day later and realize, man, I wasted 6 hours on that idea. Or you think of a concept like, oh, I should build like this, and then I'm gonna open up the attack on this part of the synth. Then like you enact those changes, and then hours and hours later you listen to it, that idea that you had, you think, oh, it didn't really sound the way I did. And so I think learning to be a little more self-critical took a long time. I was lucky I had a good set of years helping me with those tracks. At the time, the label went back and forth, and there was this version and that one, and I think eventually we came up on that kind of like, I mean, we I guess approved. I wrote that kind of staccato eighth note pattern that is sort of like the heart of the remix now. Of course, it's easy with a track like that because it has a natural big synth hook built into it. I think after my growth after mau5trap was kind of interesting. A lot of it, the growth I would say, was more about like learning the music industry is and also isn't, as well as I think trying to find my own voice. I think I was so set on mau5trap being the barometer of electronic music, kind of make it or break it for me. At the time, that was kind of exciting. People say, oh, is this like a dead mouse thing? I felt really kind of guilty with all that too, because Joel had worked really, really hard for so many years building that sound, building that label, that brand. And I think it's a lot easier to, learn how to make a pizza than to invent pizza. And I realized, I think longevity was going to come from integrity, but also, my own voice. I thought, okay, well, what is my own voice? Like, what experiences have I actually lived that are worth writing about, that are going to influence a perspective that'll be, uniquely mine, sonically, narratively, etc. So that's been, I'm still, working on a lot. And I think your own voice is it's a difficult thing to find, and then you got to have the confidence in your own voice too, which is, it's always a work in progress. Okay, question from Cormac Crehan. I don't know. I heard you got big off remix. Was it a competition, or did it get noticed another way? If it was a competition, was it your first try at a competition? Actually, you know what? I had done a few remix contests. Were just the ones that would pop up. Like, I don't know if the community is still super big, but back in the day, there were like, you could hang out on KVR and Gearsluts forums, and there'd be, stems would show up. And then I think back in the day, like the EDM production forum, I had submitted some stuff on there for some feedback under like an old username. And then on, I think, like, what was it, like 4chan's Mew, late at night, you throw some stuff up just to kind of throw yourselves to the wolves. And yeah, I never won any of those like remix contests that popped up from smaller labels. I was just doing them because I could, like, win a VST or something. And like, the real incentive, to be honest, was sort of like going through people's stems, because like I didn't have any real experience or friends that was going to let me go through like an Ableton session of a completed project. So that was my only real chance at seeing how these things were assembled, and like, oh, I didn't know they took that frequency out of that synth, or I didn't know that you could put that much energy into that part of the mix, or even just how simple things sounded in isolation, but how well they mixed together. But yeah, the first one was when they were doing, but I already given mau5trap a ton of tracks, and they were like a lot of labels looking for people to produce on a good budget the first day. So yeah, I took the oral signups, went on for that 5 years of Mouse thing. And then I was really fortunate that like I couldn't even afford to turn my phone on when he played it out at Hard Day of the Dead. I had to, like, the credit card and like re-top up just so I could access my message machine, so that I could hear Chris playing it through the speakers. But Scars official, what is your favorite type of sidechain, compressor bus sidechain, or volume automation sidechain? And my favorite candy. It sort of depends on the track itself. I mean, use the you can build the sidechain into the Ableton compression. Sometimes, especially with synths and vocals, you want to be able to control a little bit better. But a lot of times these days it's LFO tool. Sometimes with LFO tool, yeah, I mean, these days, yeah, I'd say it's mostly LFO tool. It's pretty quick to draw. And before, I could, like, my old computer, I didn't use it a lot because I couldn't have a lot of plugins running, and so I'd have to really think if it was going to work out, and then I'd print it to audio. So it was a really tedious process, and I think it's forced me to write in a certain way, right? Like, I almost had to have the whole idea of a track done. Like, I think Rival Consoles now, there's a lot of he draws out his track, he sketches them visually, like he'll use angles for builds, and he'll sketch things in. And I had to think that way and really write everything down and sketch it out, because I had to basically write each track, print it to audio, then bring in the next one, which is why the last album was really frustrating to finish up. Definitely Atticus. How often do you take breaks from making music? Take sometimes like a week or so off. I probably should. Well, I think Melissa makes me, for sure, get out of the house, right? For we go camping and canoeing, and those things I think are really important for a lot of things, because you can sit and write music all day, and you can get better at production. You can refine your sound, but I think the thing that, at least the way I like to write music, is sometimes something kind of worth writing about. I think, which is, well, especially for when I looked at Charcoal, Halo, and Bloom, and Lavender God, like, I had to have something that I wanted to say. Like, there was an emotion that sort of had to come out, and if I wasn't going to make a film or write a book, I could articulate it musically. So I mean, the breaks are important to give yourself a break. Is like, I don't think staring at a screen is good for anybody. It's like an inevitability in the way we produce music. Give your ears a break, and yeah, you gotta live a bit of life too to have something worth kind of talking about. Okay. Okay, Flurenberg is asking a question. Your use of movie dialogue, get them all cleared from copyright before release, or are they free open source? Which sources of content do you recommend? Those ones are honestly just things that I come across in media that I enjoy, and I don't clear them. That's why they're only out there for SoundCloud, and why we got the whole video done with Justin Hartney, a great filmmaker. We could only really show the one time online, which was I won't say it's like it was a wasted endeavor, but I mean for how much creativity he poured into it, it's a shame that the copyright held up us from kind of exhibiting it in a broader sense. But yeah, for the most part, it's just about like the idea and yeah, building the narrative context. Is like when I do a storyline, I'll have a lot more music than fits into the mix. I'll have a lot more clips that will kind of go underused or unused, just because of how they fit and how they flow. The last one, storyline 3, was I think mostly, until we get to the conclusion, it's all Terrence Malick stuff about like masculinity and fatherhood and what kind of man are you and what kind of man do you want to be. And I think at the time I was going through all that, and it just so happens that Terrence Malick's films had a ton of those themes in it as well. So and then like the first one, what is open with I knew these two people, that's from a film called Paris, Texas. So and sources of content do you recommend? I think just stuff that moves you. I mean, if you're moved by a scene in Star Trek, or if you're moved by dialogue from a video game, I mean, it's all just creativity, and I think creativity begets other creativity. Let's I'm going to scroll down to get to some more questions here. Weekend dance. I've got only one question. What really hits you when you listen to a remix? I think for the most part, just what hits me when you listen to anything else. I mean, sometimes like the remix is so far from the original that it just, I mean, it is its own work. They're all their own works. But like when you hear like the John Hopkins remix of Magnets, that's like a completely different production, right? And you get tracks that are pretty similar, but like a fresh take. It's like a little more play-outable or something. But I think like any music, for me, it's melody, arrangement, harmony, often texture. I think sound design elevates the ideas in a grand way. But yeah, I mean, same that moves me with the remix is what moves me with normal music too. Sauce Code has a question. What inspires you to finish something? Usually deadlines. And how do you start a track usually? Yeah, so I mean, deadlines are always going to force you to finish something. That saying, like, the perfect is the enemy of the finished? But there's the other one that says a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, right? I don't care like how many projects I have on the go, but if I have 0 finished tracks, I have 0 tracks out in the world. So sometimes you just got to let it go, right? I mean, that's the problem sort of I'm having a bit with some tracks right now, is I think the idea is essentially completed. I wonder if it sounds like Atlas, or if it has, if the sound design has enough detail in it. And then, I go back and it's like tracks that were executed. Like I have a track called Carmen that was done in an hour, and it's just all like, loops and samples, and then like a cool chord progression and a pretty hooky melody. So there's that. And then there's, a track like I Need You More, which is really stripped back. And it's like a really slow side chain, because it's got like a really boomy kick that it's side chain too. So it just sort of hung out for too long. It all worked because you had that one really, really cool sample from the Richard Twice track. So I don't know, maybe I got to like, simplify. But then of course you listen to like, a Max Cooper thing, you're like, oh, I have to be complicated and detailed so everyone knows how smart I am. So, you battle, your own self a lot. But yeah, finishing tracks is hard, which is I think why this whole remix contest just away, because I know how hard it is to finish one track with those elements, and so turn it to so many. I'm scrolling down now to get to some more questions. Let's see here. Okay, perfect. All right, well, I guess I'll just sort of like scroll from, like, I'm at the live. Oh, holy, actually I gotta go way down to the bottom. There's a lot here.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys. There's a lot of chat too. Yeah. All the excitement of it all.
I know, this is kind of nice,
Yeah.
Let's see. Should I just read, like, if there's like the next questions that start coming in now?
Sure,
so I'm not like jumping back.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I don't think there is any previous ones, so yeah, get into it.
Perfect.
jumping down to the bottom. I think most of it is taken care of now. If I'm missing any, I guess we could just kind of say if there's any final questions for anyone, to just drop them in the chat now. Jeff's been very generous with his time. I'm sure that you know, the day will go on and you've got things to do. But yeah, everything in terms of winners, guys, is pinned to the topic of this channel if you wanted to see them, or you've just joined us and know again that they'll be getting uploaded hopefully within the next couple of hours on emanate.live. So jump over there and sign up, and I'll announce that in the announcement channel, so you won't miss it. I'll at everyone. So yeah, it looks like.
Okay, so cool. So there's a couple more questions. Yeah, I'll take. Just kind of get through these questions for the next little bit, eh?
For sure.
Dabpression. Is there any advice you give to people who aren't known finding a label that best represents their sound? Yeah, I think that's a good question too, right? You think, like I sort of say with like, food or something, like you could be like the best sushi chef in the world, but if you're working at a pizza spot, it's kind of, people aren't going there for sushi. No one's going to be ordering your sushi. You're going to think, oh, is my sushi really bad? Like, I worked so hard to be so good at this one thing, but just not what they're going there for. And I think sometimes I sort of have to understand that in, my own life, my own perspective as well. And yeah, I think it can be a lot to kind of dig around and find. I mean, if there's a certain thing that you love writing, I think that's the best thing. Just find where you feel comfortable writing and you don't mind sitting for hours and hours and hours and hours on end. Because if it's not coming from the heart, or your soul's not really into it, I think it's going to be really hard for you to kind of motivate yourself beyond the first year or the first few tracks, because it's just not going to feel like you. But it can be really hard to figure out, oh, is this label out there? Is there someone that really represents my sound? I think that's when you start listening to like a lot of, if there's an act you like, listen to their set. Who are they playing out? Where are those tracks coming from? And what are those, the acts that they like? Who are they playing out? And what labels are those sitting on? I think that's a lot of it too. Like, labels are, I think it's two things. One, I think these days there's a lot of labels that are kind of overwhelmed with submissions. But another one, I've never known a label to pass on something that's great, that's going to be an asset to them. So, I mean, I would say kind of do the music first, but there are tracks too where, this is a famous one, like I had a track called like Razor, RASOR. They didn't really want it to come out. I remember this, like if you bug Chris Johnson or whatever, they're like, oh, he's like, yeah, it's kind of cool production, man, but you're really going to play this thing out? And then I made a point of playing it out like every set for a long time, just to kind of prove a point. So, they're not always right. And like, I didn't want to put that track Riot out. And to this day, I'm like, oh, it's kind of like an unfinished melody and the chord progression's like a little on the nose. But they're like, no, don't worry, it'll be fine. And we put it out and, I think it worked for a lot of things. So it's hard to know who's right and who's wrong. I think that's one thing you have to, through experiences, you got to, trust yourself, and you got to be able to listen to your stuff with a little more accuracy. But I think that's more approaching it like, professionally. It has to be fun. It has to be something that, you'd be doing anyways. Because, if I didn't have a single release, I bet I'd still spend this much time on music. It's a bonus that it gets to, to come out and this whole, adventure. But, like when I'm playing, banjo with my brother, like, singing songs on the piano, those aren't releases. Those are because music is better than anything else I could be doing at that time. Nightshade, any chance you could hire you for a small fee for some feedback on our respective remix? Oh, you could just message to me. I'll grab it, eh? You DM me on Twitter. I'll try to get through today. Tom Barnes, DNB, thanks for the opportunity. Really appreciate it. Will there be any future remix competitions? I hope so. This kind of really opened my eyes. I know I'm not like, Mr. Online or Mr. Internet. So I was really, overwhelmed with what this whole initiative turned into, from, Emanate and Rising and mau5trap, for everyone to kind of come together and, show that there's this community of creativity. So I'd be extremely surprised if this is the last time I dip my toe in this, because it was a real ride. It was awesome. Question from Canis. Well, everyone has their own style of writing. What's the best way for you personally to bring a small idea to fruition? I think that's the tricky part, right? Is like finding that voice and figuring out what it is. And is like a band like Zeppelin, they can have Misty Mountain Hop, and they can have Bron-Y-Aur, and they can have Achilles' Last Stand, and those are really different productions and sounds and energies and moods, but they all have Robert Plant on them, and that's that kind of consistent factor. A lot of electronic music doesn't have that, so I think you lean on production or melody as your voice, right? That's your lead singer, and you sort of have to have that. Like Stefan Bodzan has his live synths that he plays, or there's like the Enrico Sangiuliano kick and growl kind of idea. Oliver Heldens had his shuffle bass house thing, and could print those tracks consistently enough that there was like the Oliver Heldens sound. I think that was sort of a thing that took me a while, because like me sort of wanted to prove like, hey, I can do this. Oh, I can do this other thing too. Watch what else I can do. Then you think, well, it has to mean something. There has to be sort of like a cohesion to it, and I think that's where I started really focusing on melody, arrangement, and what kind of emotions were going to be in my music, what kind of concepts are going to be in my music that maybe weren't going to be else out there. Nightshade's question. I think a big concern is that so many people are producing. It's a flush market of producers and a very limited number of spots available for labels to get recognized. Yeah, I think that's definitely it. I mean, you see people that are self-releasing and turning it into a whole thing, like I guess Lane 8, right? What this never happened turned into, it was a concept that became now a way of producing shows and gathering a community together, and records that sort of fit that mold. So I think there's going to be a flush market of good tracks out there, and it's going to be tricky. But I think I always figure quality gets noticed, sometimes right away, sometimes eventually. But I think it's hard to really ignore quality. But with labels, yeah, I mean, labels are run by people too, right? Sometimes they're going to get it right, sometimes they're going to get it wrong, and sometimes they're just going to get lucky. So I wouldn't produce towards a specific end so much as just, it can be really tempting, right? Because I mean, I don't want to contradict myself. I did set that benchmark up for myself. I was writing and producing constantly in other areas, especially like the film and composition land. But it was more kind of setting it as a goal for chasing my own standard of quality than it was necessarily they're the only ones that were gonna let me be happy with myself or self-satisfied. Like labels that didn't exist 2 years ago that are now releasing amazing records, and they're started by artists, or they're started by promoters or venues or events that turn into a collective, or a collective that turned into a festival or something. So there's a lot of different ways to share music these days. Like, this is my first time on Discord, for instance, and it turns out there's like a whole community here and everything. So I think it's just I mean, I would never get too discouraged by the fact that because if you get discouraged by someone else's good record or something, like I think there's people half my age that were writing way better records than I ever have in this contest. So I think not to say like, oh, stay true to yourself, but I mean, chase music for the love of music, right? Like, it's just so fun to write. I'm gonna keep going down,
I'm just gonna jump in there and contribute to that as well. I think you've nailed it with what you said. Be true to yourself, be genuine, and like with all the stuff, the tools available at the moment with self-releasing and building your own brand and making your own thing, like just start, and quality will stand out. Just make sure that the quality is as high as you can possibly get it, because one of the things I keep trying to tell everyone, or remind them at least, is that if you have 4 or 5 records out, or however many, on your own little personal label, and suddenly you get picked up by a label, however long later, people can come back and discover your old work. So don't be disheartened if you're sending in records. Listen to feedback always. Try and grow as much as you can. But just be self-sustained as much as possible, and something magic will happen if the passion and the love is there.
Yeah, and it's interesting because in that comment, the quality as high as possible. Quality can mean a lot of different things, right? I mean, you can write a quality really high quality record with, you know, just a piano or just a guitar. And there's not a lot of sound design. I mean, I guess there is. Pianos are extremely hard to mix, but what I mean, sometimes the quality can be about the sound design. Sometimes it can be the quality of the composition, right? I mean, if your thing is about a great vocal, then maybe the production is a bit more simple and it lets the vocal really, you know, sell itself and be the storyteller. But yeah, there's a lot of ways to approach music, and you know, it's a cliche, but don't be like, you know, the next something. Just be the first you.
Yeah.
And you know, I admit I take my time with that too. It's like it's hard to put out a record you love and you believe in, and sometimes, yeah. But you know, just keep like writing and producing. I mean, yeah, I went through like, you know, jump back and forth between like 3 or 4 projects this morning before 10 a.m. just because, you know, the one from last night I thought, okay, was that melody really good? Oh, it actually was pretty good, eh? And then, you know, I heard something this morning from a track I was working on for a few months now, trying to finish up for the next album. And you know, some things take an hour, some things take a week, some things, you know, take years. But yeah, I just love writing music, and it's been a real joy talking with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Is that everything? That's it? Um, you happy to wrap up there, Jeff?
Oh, for sure, eh? Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, whatever's good with you guys. It's been a joy this last hour and a bit.
Yeah, it's been so great having you. I think there's been so much value in, not only hearing what your journey has been and all the questions and plugins and the way that you write and approach your music, and just sort of get a bit of an inside snapshot into your world and how you create is pretty valuable, I'd say, for everyone. Some of the main messages I think, that I can sort of highlight is be yourselves, guys. And I think it was just what Jeff said before, like be the first you, not the next someone else. I think that's super important. And sometimes it takes time for you to get recognized. Sometimes it's quicker, like, you just have to do what you love and be happy with that. So yeah, again, man, like, thank you so much. I'm so glad that this was valuable for you guys. And again, I want to just do a big shout out to mau5trap and 720 and Rising, and you know what, Noel, I forgot to shout you out, but you've worked really hard with me organising this, and I'm super thankful for all the time that you've put into this as well. I couldn't leave you out. Hey, I'm so sorry I didn't pick that up in the beginning. And yeah, just to wrap up, guys, we do have a little giveaway in the announcement with Dave Winnell. He's an Emanate artist. He's giving away a mentor session. So if anyone's interested in that, go and check it out. All the remixes will be uploaded, and I will announce that and email it to everybody as well, so nobody misses anything. And yeah, sign up to emanate.live. That's where they'll be. And I think that sort of covers it. Like, just thank you for being here, and thank you, Jeff. Is there anything you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, thanks for, Emanate and mau5trap and 720 and Rising. But anyone that like engaged with the music, like, listened to it, going back to like, the first tracks to now, and all the creativity that just poured in, it was just unbelievable. Records beyond what I could produce, and it's just it's a really cool thing to be a part of. Like, so thanks for coming out and spending Wednesday chatting, but just like the hours everyone poured into the creative process, because holy smokes, man, creativity is hard. It's really hard. I think hopefully everybody recognizes that, especially like when you listen to everyone's music too. Like, as I mean, if you're not a big fan of someone's song or something, like, they still worked so hard on it, and they could have done anything else that's a lot more chill. They could have had a shower or eaten chips, and they decided to be disciplined and creative and ambitious. And yeah, I think just I'm happy that there are this many people that spend their free time creating.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, big shout out to anyone again that entered and who is here now. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm excited to get these remixes up and to everyone's ears, and yeah, we'll update you all. And thanks. If you have any questions for me on anything, I'll be in the channel all the time, as you know. Thanks for joining us, and until the next one, I suppose.
Awesome. Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys.